Well, good morning, you guys. If we haven't met, my name is Nate. I'm the lead pastor of the Front Church. And perhaps you're new, perhaps you're from another tradition. Maybe you don't consider yourself particularly religious. I just want to say, welcome. We are creating the Front Church for you. And we want to be inviting as many people as possible to experience Jesus' story. And we want to have fun doing it. We think Jesus had a lot of fun. His first miracle was turning water into wine. He keeps the party going. And so we want to have fun. Today's going to be a great day. If you're wondering, when is the drawing? When's the drawing for the apples, the AirPods, and the Apple TV 4K? We're going to do that at 11:15. So after we wrap up at 11, you have time to grab some tacos, or you have time, don't forget about your kids. You have time to get your kids and some tacos and play some yard games, and then we'll make sure you have a ticket and you're eligible, and we're going to have that. That's super fun. No one does Halloween like a Utahn. You know what I mean? Utahns do Halloween. Before I married a Utahn, I did not Halloween well. But once I married a Utahn, I started Halloweening better. These are a few of my favorite costumes. That's me and Robin. That is when we were Hawaiian tourists right there. Really proud of that one. We went to a football game that night, and I got to be Gumby at a football game, and Robin was a mummy because she was 2 weeks away from having our first baby that one. So we were pumped. And then I don't know how long Robin spent gluing cotton balls to a hoodie, but it was hours on hours, and that is with Robin and Mina, she's almost 6 years old, and me. And so Robin has definitely stepped up my Halloween game. Thank you, Robin. My kids love playing dress up. I don't think it's just my kids, though. I spied some pretty sick costumes this morning. I think I saw Spiderman, and what is it about you put on the new clothes, you put on the Spiderman outfit, and bam, you're changed. You're ready to scale the walls. You're ready to take down the bad guys. You're ready to spew your spray out your wrist. Or like when my daughter puts on her Elsa costume, bam, she's changed. All of a sudden, she's ready to freeze the bad guys. She's ready to do the thing. She's ready to be a beautiful princess. It could be the quietest, shyest little kid. But you put the right clothes on, and they're different, right? And we're in a teaching series right now called Let the Kids Teach Us. And we think sometimes we're the teachers of the kids, but we think if we let them, they can be our teachers. And we think if we let them, they can teach us about our relationship with Jesus too. And so this morning, we're going to let the kids teach us that the right clothes have the power to change us. Little Jonny, Spiderman, changed. Mina, Elsa costume, changed. So we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 3. Romans is a letter that the Apostle Paul writes to a small group of house churches in the city of Rome in the first century. Paul is going to be talking in Romans 3 about some old clothes, and then he's going to be talking about some new clothes available in Jesus. And he's writing to a bunch of people who really need Jesus' new clothes because the old clothes aren't working for them. The old clothes aren't working as they're trying to figure out, how do we be a community of Jew and Gentile, male and female, different societal classes, different amounts of wealth? What does it look like to be a people together? And the old clothes aren't working. And so Paul's going to remind them of their new clothes that are going to help them. But first, he's going to start by talking about their old clothes. So we're going to look at Romans chapter 3. That's the big number 3 and the little number 9. Halfway through 9. For we have already made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are all under the power of sin. Under the power of sin. That feels weird to us, I think, to hear. What does he mean when he says that? And I think one thing he means is it's not just that the right clothes have the power to change us, but the wrong clothes have the power to change us. And sin can be kind of a churchy word, but I always am attracted to Francis Spufford's definition of sin. He really helps me. He's a Brit who really likes his four-letter words. I've had to edit his quote for church this morning, but he calls sin the human propensity to mess things up. And here's a quote that I think is going to be really helpful before we keep going any farther. But for most of us, the point eventually arrives when, at least for an hour or a day or a season, we find we have to take notice of our human propensity to mess things up. HPTFTU, as I think I'd better call it. Our appointment with the realization often comes at one of the classic moments of adult failure. When a marriage ends, when a career stalls or crumbles, when a relationship fades away with a child seen only on Saturdays, when a supposedly recreational coke habit turns out to be exercising veto powers over every other hope and dream. It need not be dramatic, though. It can equally well just be the drifting into place of one more pleasant, indistinguishable little atom of wasted time, one more morning like all the others, which quietly discloses you to yourself. You're lying in the bath and you notice that you're 39 and that the way you're living bears scarcely any resemblance to what you think you've always wanted. Yet you got here by choice, by a series of choices for things which, at any one moment, temporarily outbid the things you say you wanted most. And as the water cools and the light of Saturday morning in summer ripples heartlessly on the bathroom ceiling, you glimpse an unflattering vision of yourself as a being whose wants make no sense, don't harmonize, whose desires deep down are discordantly arranged, so that you truly want to possess and you truly want not to at the very same time. You're equipped, you realize, for farce or even tragedy more than you are for happy endings. The human propensity to mess things up dawns on you. You have indeed messed things up. Of course you have. You're human, and that's where we live. That's our normal experience. So when Paul talks about living under the power of sin, sin at the very least is a human propensity to mess things up. And we can all identify with that. And Paul says these are the clothes that we all start with, no matter tradition or background. So he's going to keep going. As it is written, there's no one righteous, not even one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There's no one who does good, not even one. Their throats are open graves. Their tongues practice deceit. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery mark their ways, and the way of peace they do not know. There's no fear of God before their eyes. Paul is just talking about old clothes. What is going on here? That feels pretty bleak, right? But these old clothes, this human propensity to mess things up, this power of sin, it has a way of taking over, like changing us to the negative. It's like an infection that just spreads. It's like a reverse metamorphosis, where it slowly takes more and more and more and more until what is left is unrecognizable. And I think if we're honest, we've all been here before. We've looked back on our lives and thought, how did I get here? And Paul, he's quoting different bits of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament here. And he's kind of piecing them together. He's got some bits of Psalms. He's got a bit of Isaiah. And here's what's going on with Paul. Jesus is always inviting us to have our view of God reshaped around who he is. And so Paul is having his view of God, no matter tradition, no matter religious background. Paul is from a certain tradition. He's having his view of God reshaped around who Jesus is, and it's changing how he's reading the Old Testament. It's changing how he's reading the Hebrew Scriptures. And so he's reading these in a new way. And it sounds bleak. And he doesn't stop yet. We're going to keep going, though. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. That would make a lot of sense for his Jewish audience. But we're going to keep going. But therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. No one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Righteous is a churchy word. It just means declared right in God's eyes, declared like in right relationship with God. And this is the crux of what Paul is trying to get across when he's talking about our old clothes. He says our old clothes are like a barrier that exists between us and our relationship with God. There's something in the middle. And some of you may experience that deep in your being. You know that to be true. Like, I don't have to tell you that. Some of you are like, yeah, there's something in the middle. There's something in the way, our old clothes, and this something, it doesn't want what's best for us. It wants to destroy us. It wants to leave us in the bath at 39, looking at our life and thinking, how in the world did I get here? My life has no resemblance to what I thought it was going to look like. Several hundred years earlier, the prophet Isaiah wrote about the righteousness that kind of we could offer to God. Like, we're like, hey, God, check it out. Like, check our righteousness out. Check out what we're bringing to the table. The prophet Isaiah described those as filthy rags. So, and the Apostle Paul is just reiterating this in that tradition, in that line of thought. He said, these old clothes aren't going to work. But don't miss this. He doesn't leave them here. And he's not going to leave us here. More importantly, he's going to tell them, God doesn't leave you here. And so it doesn't matter how dark it gets for you. God doesn't leave you there. Some of you are here this morning just for that. But now, Paul says, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. Those are big words. He's saying, but now. So he shifts from talking about our old clothes to talking about some new clothes. And he's saying, right standing with God doesn't come with an impressive religious resume. It doesn't come by trying to impress God, but right standing with God, he says in chapter 3, verse 20, does not come through works of the law, but it's going to come another way. How? How do we get these new clothes? How does that work? Verse 22, he says, this righteousness is given, it's gifted through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile. Paul's saying righteousness with God, which being declared right in God's eyes, doesn't come by what we bring to the table, but it comes by what Jesus brought to the table and believing him for that. Not trying to conjure it up in our own selves. And righteousness, just to be super, super clear, righteousness, being right with God, means having access to God's full presence. Not just like half his presence, or a quarter of his presence, or the possibility of being in his presence. But being declared right with God means we get all of God. And this is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. And he keeps going. Verse 23, for all, that's you, that's me, that's them, that's everyone. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. All of us have the old clothes. All of us deal with the human propensity to mess things up. All of us start with a barrier between us and God, but God doesn't leave us there. No matter how dark, no matter how far we think we've fallen. And the Apostle Paul uses some churchy words here, some big words. He says justified. It's interesting because justified and righteousness are different English words, but they're the same Greek word with the same Greek root. So when Paul says, because of what Jesus has done, we are justified, he's saying what Jesus did on the cross righted us. It made us right. It gives us full access to God's presence. He says God does this with his grace. He uses the word redemption. Redemption is a beautiful word that means to buy back. To take that we might be owned by the old clothes people. But God has bought us back with Jesus and given us new clothes. Verse 25, he keeps going. He says, God presented Christ. Do you know that Christ isn't just, it's not Jesus' last name. It's the Greek term for Messiah. God presented the Messiah as a sacrifice of atonement. That is so loaded. You guys, I wanted to preach like a 30-minute sermon on that one phrase. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it today. They don't have time today. But man, if you want to talk to me about that phrase afterward, we can talk. But God presented the Messiah as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. And he did this to demonstrate his righteousness. Remember, we don't bring any righteousness, but he brings the righteousness. Because in his forbearance, he has left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so as to be just in the one who justified those who have faith in Jesus. Sacrifice of atonement. Because of the sin, because of our human propensity to mess things up, that gets in the way of our relationship with God, because this is an infection that keeps spreading, because this is a reverse metamorphosis that keeps taking more and more and more and more and more of us until what is left is unrecognizable. Because of that, God doesn't say, too bad. He comes to us. And God himself, in Jesus' flesh, takes sin and all of its consequences into his own body on the cross. He says, I'll tell you what. I'll take your old clothes. You have my clothes. On the cross, we get the gnarliest picture of the effects, the full effects of sin. Where sin wants to take us. What sin wants to do to us. We get that pictured in the gnarliest way on the cross of Jesus. But in Jesus' resurrection, we get a picture of what he wants to do in us. And he offers us new clothes. Not because of anything we bring to the table, but it's all him. It's have my right standing with God. I'll take your old clothes. You want to know the best thing about the clothes God gives? They don't come off. How do we get them? How do we do the exchange? How do we get rid of the old clothes and get the new clothes? He says in chapter 3, verse 22, we already read it, this righteousness is given, it's gifted, right standing with God is gifted through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. Not through works of the law, not through an impressive religious resume. How do we get the new clothes? We say, we need you to give us the new clothes. That's how we do it. We don't clean the clothes up like these. We say, we need you to give us the new clothes. Jesus, you said you got the new clothes. These are our old clothes. We need you to give us the new clothes. That's how we get it. Confessing, we don't bring anything to the table. But God didn't ever stop loving us. God didn't ever stop pursuing us. We say, our sin, Jesus, put you on the cross. Our sin is left with you on the cross, and your life is left with me. I want to pause for a minute and just ask a simple question. What if right standing did come through works of the law? What if we could earn access to presence? What if we could position ourselves or bring an impressive religious resume to God and say, God, check it out. And he says, okay, let me let you in. What if we could do that? Does this make us more loving? I don't think so. I think it creates a kind of moral superiority and a moral inferiority complex. Where if that's how it works, then I think we tend to view ourselves, if we think we're doing well, as better than others. I don't think it leads to love of others. Does it make us more empathetic if we can just get it somehow, earn it, impress God with our religious resume? I don't think so. Here. Does it make us more transparent about the deep stuff going on, our deep struggles, our deep doubts, the habits that we don't want to let anyone else in on because we're just kind of embarrassed by or struggling with on our own? Does it, if we earn our position before God, are we more or less likely to open up about those things? Less. But if we're coming from the spot of, I got the old clothes, I need Jesus to take the old clothes, I don't need to do anything other than say, Jesus, I need the new clothes, he gives me the new clothes, then I can be honest about it all. Any doubt, any question, any habit, any struggle. This is a type of community Jesus desires to create for us. Right standing with God doesn't come through what we bring. This is why it's so significant. It comes through faith in Jesus and what he brought to the table. So we're going to let the kids and the Apostle Paul teach us the right clothes have the power to change us. But they also have the power to change the world. This week I've been thinking about the power of the right clothes. The clothes that Jesus offers to us, full access to God's presence. The security of God's love, the clothes that don't come off, when the world seems to be crumbling, the peace of God that nothing else can touch. I've been thinking about the power of these new clothes, and a few images and a few stories came to my mind. One, I find this next picture so incredibly compelling. In 2014, tensions were ratcheting up between pro-European Union Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government and the police. And this is a picture where you can see the riot police on one side. And then on the other side of the riot police is a mob. But right smack dab in the middle are these Orthodox priests holding a cross. As if to say, if either of you are going to come across, you're going to have to go through us. See, old clothes lead to the division. New clothes, full access to God's presence, the security of God's love that can't be touched. Nothing can touch that and leads to courage. I've been thinking about the story of Stephen. Stephen was the first martyr a follower of Jesus who died for his faith. In Acts chapter 7, we read about him. And at the very end, as he's being murdered, in Acts 7, verse 60, as he's dying, he says, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Forgive them. 150 years earlier, we have some Jewish martyr stories, and they had very different speeches towards the people that were about to kill them. They threw all sorts of insults. They did not pray for the forgiveness of their murderers. We know this because they're quoted in the Maccabees, which is part of the Apocrypha. We can nerd out about that afterward too. But it's a history, but it's a history about 150 years before the time of Jesus. And so what do they say to their murderers, the Maccabees? You accursed wretch! For you there's no resurrection of life. See how God's mighty power will torture you and your descendants. You're most defiled immortals. It sounds like Twitter. But Stephen's death looks different because he sees the lives of others as more valuable than his own. You see, we believe that something in the fabric of the universe shifted when Jesus died on a cross and prayed for the forgiveness of his enemies. Oh man, check out this guy. His name's John Perkins. John Perkins is a famous civil rights leader. He's like in his 90s. He's still around. He's still doing awesome work. In Scott Saul's book, A Gentle Answer, he tells the story of John Perkins. I want to read it for you. John Perkins knows suffering. His mother died when he was a baby. His father abandoned him when he was a child. His brother was killed during an altercation with a Mississippi police officer. As a black man during the civil rights era, he endured beatings and imprisonments and death threats. Since that time, Perkins has faithfully confronted injustice, racism, oppression, and violence while also advocating valiantly for reconciliation, peace, equality, healing, and hope. If anyone has a right to be bitter, if anyone has a right to turn hate into an asset and use it to his own advantage, it is John Perkins. Yet instead of feeding the cycle of resentment and retaliation, he spends his life preaching against these wrongs while advocating for forgiveness and moving toward enemies in love. With the moral authority of one who practices what he preaches, Perkins' life is a sermon that heralds reconciliation and peace between divided groups. He has built his life upon the belief that his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, has left no option except to advance neighbor love. This is an essential task for those who identify as followers of Jesus Christ, who laid down his life not only for his friends, but also for his enemies. Jesus is a God of reconciliation and peace, not a God of hate or division or us against them. Jesus is the God of the gentle answer. I was thinking about William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce lived in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He never lost a parliamentary election in Britain from the age of 21 to 74. He was born into a position of influence. He exchanged his old clothes for new clothes, and then he got some courage. And in his courage, he battled to end the African slave trade and slavery in all its forms in the British Empire. He battled for 46 years. From 1787 to 1833, a bill to abolish the slave trade passed in 1807 after failing 11 times. And then a bill to abolish slavery in all its forms in Britain did not win until 3 days before his death in 1833. 46 years. If you're John Perkins, if you're William Wilberforce, how do you keep showing up? New clothes. New clothes. I was thinking about the Roman world. Paul writes this letter that we're reading right now to about 150 to 300 Christians in Rome in the AD 50 or 60. Okay, 150 to 300 Christians. We know that by the 4th century, Rome was over half Christian. There's like 25 million Christians. That's insanity. When Paul wrote this letter, Rome was filling colosseums with people to watch gladiators fight to the death and shed blood, and they cheered. In the 4th century, those colosseums were museums. In the 1st century, if you were poor, if you didn't have a lot of wealth, if you were on the bottom of the social ladder, you were basically in society's eyes deemed as not worth that much. By the 4th century, people realized because Jesus died for all people are worthy of dignity and respect and to be treated as such. And it was the Christians between the 50 AD and 400 AD that when the Romans left, when the plagues hit the towns and the Romans bailed, the Christians stayed and took care of those who weren't even a part of their own tribe. How? New clothes. Don't miss what's on the table here this morning for us. The new clothes that God offers us, right standing before Him, right relationship with Him, available to us through faith in Jesus because of what He has done. There's nothing that can touch the life of God in us. There's nothing that can touch God's presence living within us. We are able, when we remember the new clothes, we are able to withstand anything. Not only that, we are actually able to move in love towards our enemies. And that, my friends, is the only thing that will change the world. We got to let the kids and the Apostle Paul And all these stories teach us that the right clothes have the power to change us and change our world. Band, could you come up here? While the band comes up, maybe you're here and you know your old clothes aren't working. You know they're not getting the job done. Paul reminds us in Romans 3, 22 through 24, that right standing with God, God's full presence available to you, is through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. That's how you get it. That's how you get his clothes. Faith in him. He takes your old clothes. You get his new clothes. What are we supposed to believe? Through faith in Jesus Christ for those who believe. He keeps telling us. Romans 3:23 says that all have sinned. We are dealing with the human propensity to mess things up. We've all messed this up. He tells us in Romans 3:24, what are we supposed to believe? That we are justified freely by his grace. Not what we bring, what he offers to us. His blood on the cross. As Christians, we talk about, it might weird some people out, and it is weird. It sounds weird. About talking about the cross and instrument of execution and talking about Jesus' blood and what the heck is going on? I get it. But here's the deal. We believe that Jesus' blood has a cleansing effect on us. We believe it's cleansing us so that we do have full access to God's presence. So that we do have full access to his life and his spirit. We believe his blood cleanses us. And you can invite Jesus into your life right now this morning. And you can know this morning. You don't have to wait. You don't have to get it all together. It's not how it works. New clothes don't come with getting it all together. New clothes come by saying, Jesus, you can have my old clothes. I'll take your new clothes. You can invite Jesus into your life right now. And this morning you can begin to experience his presence. You can begin to experience his spirit in you. You can begin to experience his life. Maybe you're here and you've forgotten about your new clothes. Easy to do. I do it too. Well, this morning it's time again to remember what the new clothes are. Because of Jesus, you're right in God's eyes. Righteousness. Because of Jesus, you're justified. You are declared right in God's eyes. Because of Jesus, you are forgiven. Because of Jesus, you are marked by his grace. Because of Jesus, you are redeemed. He's bought you, and there's nothing that can take the new clothes off. God will continue to move towards you in love. He will continue to pursue you. He's ready again to remind you who you are because of Jesus, and for you to experience his life again. Can everyone bow your heads with me and close your eyes? Just take a moment. You and God. This is the God who doesn't leave you in the dark, but in Jesus has come to rescue you. Think about you and God. If you're ready to put on God's new clothes that are offered to you this morning, in your hearts, just pray this prayer with me. Jesus, come into my life. What I've been doing hasn't been working. I need you to remove the barrier between God and me. I need your life in me. With your head still bowed and your eyes still closed, do you know that if you pray a prayer like that, inviting Jesus into your life, you are righteous right now, Not because of you, but because of Jesus. You're forgiven right now. Not because of you, because of Jesus. You are marked by grace right now. Not because of you, but because of Jesus. You're redeemed right now. Not because of you, but because of Jesus. God, with these truths, sink into our hearts. In your name.